Recognition is the beginning of direction. Before thinking develops anything, something is first recognized, and what is recognized determines what thinking begins to serve. This is the 7-minute daily focus, day 91 of 365, to focus on the world within from the world without. Today's focus, the law of thinking, first sense and recognition. Pause for a moment. Recognition is the beginning of direction. Before thinking develops anything, something is first recognized, and what is recognized determines what thinking begins to serve. So recognition is not casual. Recognition is origin in motion. There are two movements of recognition: recognition within and recognition from what is physically seen. And these are not the same. Recognition within is primary, it is not borrowed, it is not reactive, and it is not dependent on appearance. Recognition from what is physically seen is secondary, and it is derived, it is reactive, and it is dependent on appearance. So the question is simple: where am I recognizing from? Pause. Thought is within, effect is without, and thinking stands between. But recognition determines what thought is received. If recognition is within, the seed is true. If recognition is from what is physically seen, the seed is reactive, and thinking will develop whatever is received. So recognition is not a small step. Recognition sets the entire direction of thinking. The first sense is the awareness of what is within, not through the five senses, not through appearance, but through direct knowing. It does not need proof, it does not ask permission, and it does not wait for what is physically seen to agree. It recognizes, and when you recognize through the first sense, thinking becomes aligned immediately, because you are no longer borrowing from appearance. You are receiving from origin. Thinking determines outcome, but recognition determines what thinking develops. So if recognition is unclear, thinking becomes unstable. If recognition shifts, thinking divides. If recognition reacts, thinking follows. But when recognition is clear, thinking becomes ordered. When recognition remains within, thinking remains steady. And steady thinking supports unfolding. Active thinking begins with recognition within. It does not wait for the world without. It does not follow appearance. And it does not adjust itself to conditions. It recognizes and remains. Passive thinking begins with recognition from what is physically seen. It reacts, it adjusts, and it follows conditions. So the difference is not effort, the difference is origin. Where does your recognition begin? If recognition is within, continuity begins cleanly. There is nothing to correct. Recognition is alignment. But if recognition begins from what is physically seen, correction becomes constant, because appearance is always changing. So thinking is forced to adjust, and adjustment creates instability. But when recognition is within, thinking does not need to adjust. It needs only to remain, and remaining produces continuity. This is where steadfastness becomes power. Remain aligned with what is within. Do not be moved by what is physically seen, because what is physically seen is always secondary, and what is within is always primary. Recognition within is the refusal to begin from the secondary. It is the decision to begin from origin. Thinking requires position, and recognition establishes that position. If you recognize within, you are positioned within. If you recognize from what is physically seen, you are positioned in reaction. So position is not effort. Position is recognition. Recognize clearly. Remain with it. Let thinking follow. You are not trying to create recognition. You are becoming aware of where you are recognizing from. So today, notice. Notice when recognition comes from within, and notice when it shifts to what is physically seen, and gently return, because each return restores origin, and each restoration supports unfolding, and what is supported continues, and what continues unfolds, and what unfolds must physically express. Consider this more deeply. Recognition is subtle, yet it is decisive. It does not announce itself with force, and it appears quietly as a knowing within. And because it is quiet, it is often overlooked. But what is overlooked becomes replaced, and what replaces it is usually what is physically seen. So the discipline here is not to create recognition. The discipline is to notice it, to notice the moment you recognize from within, to notice the moment that recognition is clear, simple, and without dependence on appearance. That moment is origin. And if you remain with it, thinking aligns naturally. No force is required, no correction is required, and no struggle is required, because alignment has already occurred. But if that moment is ignored, something else takes its place. Recognition begins to form from what is physically seen, from conditions, from appearances, and from changing circumstances. And once recognition shifts, thinking must follow. So instability does not begin with thinking. Instability begins with recognition, and stability begins with recognition within. This is why the first sense is essential. It is the awareness that allows you to notice origin before it is replaced. It is the awareness that allows you to remain with what is true within. And it is the awareness that prevents thinking from being redirected by appearance. Without this awareness, thinking becomes reactive. And with this awareness, thinking becomes directed. So do not rush past recognition. Pause with it. Let it settle. Let it become clear, and let it establish position. Because once recognition is clear, thinking does not need instruction. It follows naturally. And when thinking follows what is within, continuity begins without resistance. This is why there is nothing to correct. Correction belongs to reaction. Correction belongs to instability, and correction belongs to a mind that is shifting between sources. But when recognition is within, there is no division, there is only alignment, and alignment produces simplicity. You no longer need to question direction, you no longer need to analyze what is happening, and you no longer need to interpret appearance. You remain with what is within, and remaining becomes your strength. So throughout this day, become aware of the beginning point, not the middle and not the outcome, the beginning, where recognition first appears. Because if the beginning is clear, everything that follows becomes ordered. If the beginning is unclear, everything that follows becomes unstable. So return to the beginning, return to recognition within, again and again. Each return strengthens alignment. Each alignment supports thinking. Each thinking sustains continuity, and each continuity allows unfolding. And what is allowed continues, and what continues unfolds, and what unfolds must physically express. Now, the affirmation for day 91. Pause for a moment. I recognize from within. I do not follow what is physically seen. My recognition is clear, and my thinking follows what is within. I remain aligned with origin. I remain steady, and I remain continuous. And because I remain, unfolding continues, and what unfolds must physically express. Remember, by design, by focus.